Om Ajnanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Hishikesha Indriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nivritatmane Swarga Pavarga Dwaraya Nityam Suchi Sade Namaha Namah Hiranya Viryaya Chaturhotraya Tantave. Hare Krishna. So thank you for joining us again in today's session. We will be continuing our discussion of chapter 6 of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and specifically the subject matter of chapter 6 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto, dealt with focusing on the transition, the obtaining of mercy, the practice of Bhakti Yoga, and the final transition of the personality whom we know as Deva Rishi, Sri Narada Muni, from his previous lifetime to his present body as a transcendental preacher who is constantly traveling around creation and beyond in being able to spread the glories of the holy name. So it was actually a very good treat. The reason why we are very enlivened by this account of Sri Narada Muni, which was his purpose. His purpose was to share the ease and the extraordinary nature of bhakti. The process of bhakti, unlike the process of Ashtanga Yoga or any other process, is extraordinarily simple. The simplicity of the process given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is profound. There's nothing more simple than being able to call upon the holy names. It's very simple. The mantra is simple. There are no rules, there are no restrictions. One is not precluded from chanting the holy names because of any external condition. One is given the authority to chant the holy names under all circumstances everywhere, which is the process. And the holy names themselves also become the final goal of the chanter. And it is such a very simplified, straightforward process that a child is able to excel in being able to take up the process of Bhakti Yoga. And we see in our own communities children showing extraordinary change in their perception of the world, their tastes, their likings, preferences versus non-preferences. There are so many differences which just come by coming in touch with the holy name, and it is such a simple process. It is accessible even to a very, very young, untrained child. It's very easy. The purpose or the process itself is similar. In the process of Ashtanga Yoga, you have, for instance, it starts with Yama, which is the basic moral code which is laid out in the world for one to exist as a human being. niyama, the rules and regulations of being able to regulate oneself for existence in this world. And then you have asana, which is the Hatha Yoga asana that we see. And the whole purpose of Hatha Yoga asana in the context of Ashtanga Yoga, which is the real context, is for one to develop physical ability for sustained practice of the process of Ashtanga Yoga. One should be able to sustain the physical body. So the scriptures talk about yoga, which is Hatha Yoga, where one is able to sit in a certain posture and they're able to push the life force from one part of the body to the other. And then if they become very, very accomplished, they're able to even push the life force from the physical manifestation or flesh and blood onto the bones, which are less destructive and they take much longer to get destroyed. So this allows them to exist in the shell of the physical body for a prolonged period of time in a certain posture. And this is the whole purpose of Hatha Yoga, is to prepare the body for prolonged readiness to control the senses. Now the next step is pranayama. Every one of us is given a fixed number of times when we can breathe in and breathe out. This number is fixed at the time of birth into this world. The number of inhalations is fixed, exhalations is fixed. So the purpose of pranayama is for us to be able to regulate the inhalation and exhalation to the point where we are able to prolong the span of time we spend in a certain conditioned existence of a body. So if you are allowed, for instance, 100 breaths, then you're able to extend the 100 breaths over a longer period of time. And by doing so, you're able to extend the existence on the plane. So we have yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and the accomplishment of all of this is to reach the point of pratyahara. Now this is Ashtanga Yoga, and pratyahara particularly allows one to withdraw their senses from engagement in the outside world, and by withdrawing the senses from engagement, one is then able to engage in the process of concentration. The senses themselves are very complex. In our previous session, we spoke of and read about 2.54 and 2.55 of the Bhagavad Gita. And 2.54 and 2.55 of Bhagavad Gita, in 2.54, Arjuna is seeking answers from Krishna, saying, what are the symptoms of one who is in samadhi? And what is samadhi? Samadhi requires the withdrawal of senses, right? Which is the process of Ashtanga Yoga, where you withdraw your senses, which is pratyahara. To withdraw your senses effectively, one should be an accomplished performer of Hatha Yoga. One should be very accomplished in pranayama. And to perform Hatha Yoga and pranayama, one should be following yama and niyama. Otherwise, it's very difficult. And then ultimately, when you come to the level of pratyahara, one is able to concentrate. Because concentration, which is the ability of the soul, which is in the body, to grab the mind and allow the mind to focus on a certain topic. Who does the grabbing? The grabbing of the mind, which are the reins in the comparison to an analogy of a chariot. In the chariot, the grabbing of the reins is done by the charioteer. In the human body, the grabbing of the mind is done by intelligence. It is intelligence, when purified by constant touch with transcendence. When intelligence is purified by constant touch with transcendence and it attains qualitative oneness with transcendence, it then allows the soul, which is within, who is the real passenger of the body, to establish control over the body. If intelligence is not in touch with transcendental subject matter, either through coming in touch with Shastra or hearing from Sadhu and Guru, then that intelligence is situated in matter. When the intelligence, the charioteer of the chariot, is in touch very extensively with matter and the modes of nature, the reins of the chariot, will pull that intelligence wherever it wants to go because the horses are completely uncontrollable. So the whole objective of the yoga system is to ultimately reach the point of pratyahara, where we grab the reins, which is the mind. By grabbing the reins using our intelligence, we withdraw our senses, and then one is able to engage in the process of dharana, which is concentration. And when one develops skills of prolonged periods of dharana, being able to concentrate, then one is able to firmly engage in dhyana. This is a very high stage because now you're engaging in smaranam. You see, smaranam is at a very high stage where one is able to withdraw their senses, they're able to concentrate, and then one is able to focus on the process of smaranam, dhyana. And when one is able to perform the process of dhyana, which is a very important feature because smaranam is the most important purifying aspect for the journey of the soul, then one qualifies themselves by constant smaranam to come into samadhi. So now samadhi is the question which Arjuna is raising in 2.54 of the Bhagavad Gita, saying, what are the symptoms of one who is going to be engaged in samadhi? Who is samadhi? Who is in samadhi? Now this journey which we described of Ashtanga Yoga is a many, many year, 1,000-year journey because it was practiced in Satya Yoga during a very conducive atmosphere. So now we see Sri Narada Muni, he passed through villages, he passed through towns, he passed through cities, he passed through metropolises, he passed through different environments which were plentiful, environments which were scarce, environments which were pleasant, unpleasant environments. He passed through all of these environments and finally reached this uninhabited forest where he could sit and he could engage in dharana, he could concentrate. So this whole purpose was for him to be able to concentrate using his intelligence, because that intelligence of Narada Muni was empowered in two ways. It was empowered by coming in touch with transcendental subject matter of association with those sages in the ashram. It was also empowered by initiation into mantra. He was also empowered simply because he became a kripa siddha. He became a subject who could receive kripa, who could receive mercy, because he positioned himself in such a manner. You see, he was a son of a maidservant, no material qualification, young child, no material qualification because he was not well read, so on and so forth. But he had this mood, he had a very authentic mood of being sober in the presence of transcendental personalities, and being sober in the presence of transcendental personalities and being able to engage in their service also gave him the opportunity to accept their remnants, which is real service. By engaging in seva, sevonmukhe jihvado, seva, which starts with the tongue, he immediately qualified to receive the next step of seva, which is to chant the holy names. First purify the tongue with Krishna Prasadam, and then you are able to chant Krishna's names because the tongue now becomes clean and purified, having come in touch with Prasad. Right? So, in this process, the different limbs of the body were engaged and his intelligence became enlivened with transcendental subject matter. When intelligence is enlivened with transcendental subject matter, it is empowered to control the mind. The intelligence is able to grab the reins, grab the horses, and bring the chariot to a halt, and then pass on the control to the soul. The soul is waiting inside. The soul has no control until intelligence is able to be purified. You see, the soul has no control. The soul is simply, a resident in a body who is completely overpowered and conditioned by the external senses, the intelligence and the mind, which are all in touch with objects of sense gratification. When those objects of sense gratification themselves, or rather, when those objects and engagement of activity are replaced by connections with the Supreme Lord, then you automatically have a cycle of purification as opposed to contamination. So this intelligence, once it is empowered by coming in touch with transcendental subject matter, Bhagavad Gita, which is the word of God, words spoken by Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam, descriptions of the authoritative pastimes of Krishna, which are completely pure, completely free from all material contamination, all material motives, including liberation. Then the intelligence is completely empowered. The empowered intelligence has the ability to grab the reins of the mind, grab the senses, stop these horses from running here and there. So in the process of Bhakti Yoga, we are Kripa Siddhas. We receive mercy by positioning ourselves as being qualified for mercy, which requires simplicity. And once we have that particular quality of being able to receive Kripa, then we become very easily empowered. You see, we become subjects or students. No teacher wants to deal with this tough student category. You know, the arrogance of a tough student, very difficult to deal with, who does not attend the school system properly, so on and so forth. Which teacher would be enthused? Compare and contrast this with someone who is very willing, very receptive, very humble. And automatically the professors and the teachers, even in the mundane situation, perspective, they are very enthused to assist, you see, because they are open. They suddenly find that there's someone who is very receptive, someone who is very open, so they start helping. What to say of transcendental sages who are filled with compassion and their purpose is to empower souls? When they come across a suitable vessel, they pour mercy. So this mercy allowed Sri Narada Muni to engage with his intelligence in dhyana. He was able to engage in dhyana and meditate on the extraordinary pastimes and the form of the Lord. He was able to engage in Leela Smaranam. Leela Smaranam is a very advanced stage. It is not something which one should think of as simply remembering the pastimes in a casual way. Leela Smaranam is a very advanced stage. To qualify oneself for Leela Smaranam, one has to pass through all the stages of being able to purify their senses, purify everything, and to reach a point of being able to remember. Remembrance is a spontaneous occurrence. Remembrance is not a forced occurrence for 2 hours when we chant in the morning and then we forget everything and we go out. And remembering, even that time, is a struggle. No. Real Leela Smaranam is where the senses have been purified. At least the senses are in the mode of goodness. And intelligence is very, very in tune with Shastra. And one is able to pass control on to the Atma who is wanting to, engage in yoga with the Lord, where the Atma is wanting to come in touch with transcendence, wanting to chant. And that point in time, Leela Smaranam occurs spontaneously when there's purity. There's no need for, extraneous pressure and imagination and so on and so forth, which is the case when it's artificial in the beginning stages. So in the beginning stages, what is advised? In the beginning stages, it is advised that one focuses on hearing the chanting of the holy names as opposed to trying to remember the Leelas. The Leelas should come automatically when time comes. We are supposed to hear the holy names, distinctly chant and hear, and automatically the Leelas of the Lord would manifest themselves when there is a proper purity, right? Everything requires situation, right? The patra, desha kala patra, right? Circumstances have to be adequate for something to manifest and to automatically manifest. So in comparison to this extraordinarily difficult process of pratyahara, where you withdraw all your senses like a tortoise, and then hold your senses, and then do not engage your senses, and then focus your mind and start concentrating, and then when you build critical mass to the point where you're able to concentrate for a prolonged period of time, you come in touch with transcendence, and one is able to achieve smaranam, which is dhyana, and then prolonged smaranam leads to samadhi, right? As opposed to that is the process of constantly engaging our senses without withdrawing them in activities related to Krishna. Engaging our senses effectively starting with the tongue, restricting the tongue to consume only prasadam is the beginning. Okay? Once you begin restricting the tongue and accomplish the restriction of the tongue, you see, we are not restricted from eating. We are restricted from indiscriminate eating, which is not contributing to our ability to control our senses. So, restricting the tongue is the first step, and it has to be done very, very carefully. It is not an ordinary occurrence that in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, even before anything begins, Sri Narada Muni, who could have given 100 different opportunities for service to the transcendental sages, chooses to say that my devotional service began with accepting the remnants of the transcendental sages. Why did he say that? He said that because restricting the tongue is the beginning. We have to restrict our tongue, and we don't restrict our tongue by fasting. We restrict our tongue by bringing our tongue in touch with transcendental food. Food which has been cooked with consciousness of wanting to please the senses of Krishna. Food which has been arranged, right? This starts from your time when you go for grocery shopping, where everything is purchased for the purpose of giving pleasure to Krishna. And then we come home, and the cooking process, Srila Prabhupada used to say, you approach the kitchen the same way as you approach the altar. If you're going to be worshipping the deity, the seriousness with which you have to approach the altar, you will also be very clean and everything is proper when you approach the kitchen. And then it is accepted. Right. So Krishna has discretion on whether he should accept, not accept. That's a different story. We will do our job very nicely. By doing so, Sri Narada Muni is advocating the beginning of devotional service, and this is one of the reasons why Srila Rupa Goswami mentions Seva Unmukehi Jihva Adav. Adav, first, Seva. Begin your Seva with transcendental prasadam. Begin your Seva with a purified tongue. Call upon the holy names. Right? And by doing so, Bhagavad Dharma is established. You are engaging your senses in the activities associated with the Lord. Because when the body is being energized with prasadam, you automatically become enlivened to engage more and more of your senses in the Lord's service. The opposite occurs when the body is energized by contaminated food. Food which has contaminations is food that is cooked in the mode of passion and ignorance. It is contaminated by the mode of goodness even, but that is not that bad. It is at least doable, livable. You can accept it. It doesn't affect you as much. So that is where everything began for Sri Narada Muni, and so easily he was able to take off from wherever he was. His senses were enlivened because his intelligence was completely engaged. So because his intelligence was already situated in the mode of goodness, he was not attracted to the cities. People whose intelligence is completely purified, whose senses are purified, and they are in the mode of goodness, they will not be attracted to the cities. So he was passing through the metropolises, he was passing through the towns, he was passing through the cities, he was even passing through the villages. Ultimately, he reaches the forest. Uninhabited forest. It's conducive. So there he engages in smaranam. How does smaranam occur? Smaranam, remembering the pastimes, occurs through engagement of intelligence in the Lord's pastimes by the chanting of the holy names. So he is engaging in very active remembrance and concentrated hearing, and he says that he didn't care. Okay? So while doing so, the Lord, being very merciful, manifests himself and gives darshan. The moment the Lord manifests himself, that is a stage of complete purity. That is a stage of complete purity. And complete purity, the senses or the subtle body develops the ability to experience transcendence in a concentrated burst. What does it mean? It means the sense of hearing, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, touch, the five active senses, they all have the ability to move in unison to a source of transcendence. So when the Lord appears, everything gets concentrated in the vision of the devotee. All the senses, they crowd themselves, and then the devotee gets a burst of transcendence through vision. When there is sound, all the senses, they rush and they become concentrated in the sense of hearing, where the devotee gets a burst of transcendence through the sense of hearing. Because of the extraordinarily intense experience where all the senses are coming in touch with transcendence, you see, we also say Krishna can eat by just looking at foodstuff. So when we offer food to the deities, Bhoga, the deity is able to look and accept. How is it so? Because the senses have the ability to do the activities of other senses. In a similar fashion, someone who is freed of this material conditioning, such a person's senses develop the ability to rush to and concentrate on the particular sense which is active and in touch with Krishna. So if there's a process of hearing, everything rushes to the hearing process. Okay, there's concentrated hearing. By just hearing, the person establishes and experiences ecstasy throughout the body. By seeing, the person establishes and experiences ecstasy throughout the body, which is the experience of Sri Narada Muni given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And once they experience all of this, the senses which come in touch with transcendence, they are pure senses. They attain qualitative oneness as well. They stop disturbing the person. There will be no more necessity for the devotee to pay any attention, to withdraw senses, to control the mind. The senses are in touch with transcendence, they're completely pure. And as a consequence, the devotee does not have to put any effort towards controlling the senses. The devotee now concentrates and puts all his energy or her energy into experiencing and serving in Krishna consciousness. So Sri Narada Muni had this experience of the Lord manifesting himself, and the transcendental Rupa disappeared, and then the Lord began speaking. So the senses rushed to the sight, and after rushing to the sight, the Lord disappears, the senses rushes to the process of hearing. So he is hearing now from this Lord. He is speaking. Krishna is speaking, and Sri Narada Muni is hearing. And by hearing, Krishna is saying, I'm not going to appear again, so I'm going to make you hanker. You see, so he's giving him a gift. He's saying, now you've seen me, you would want to see me again because you now are fully in love. You want to see me. So since you want to see me, I'm not going to appear. Now it's going to be as if that you're going to hanker in separation. This hankering in separation is very intense, especially if there has been an experience, especially a profound experience. And the profound experience is what Sri Narada Muni experienced. And that hankering began. This hankering would allow Sri Narada Muni to intensify his search, intensify all the activities, and as a consequence, it would be the fuel with which he would depart from this world. Everything requires fuel. Intensity is required for everything. There can be intense material experiences which leave one shaken if it is negative, or leave one completely distracted even if it is so-called pleasure, fleeting pleasure. There can be intense experiences of spirituality, and that intense experience is required for someone to be able to focus. And the Lord very mercifully made this arrangement that Narada Muni could see in his previous lifetime what he was about to attain and who he was actually praying to. So it's an extraordinary experience. You know, there's no question of faith anymore. The faith was established in the heart by the sages. That faith has now been transformed into an experience. And Sri Narada Muni is going to hold on to that experience in his previous lifetime. He's going to hanker. And by hankering, he's going to intensify the practice of sadhana. By doing so, ultimately, one day, due to the effect of time, he departed. How was the departure? The departure was for a pure devotee. He is in a pure state. The subtle body is no longer false ego, intelligence mind. It's no longer in that particular order. The false ego has become true ego. It's completely identified with the spiritual body because he can see his spiritual body is engaging in service. The intelligence is already purified, and the senses, the mind is already purified. So the transformation which occurs is such that it is almost like a bolt of lightning. When lightning appears, there's also illumination. So it's almost, both events occur together. There's lightning and there's illumination. So when they depart from the material body, which is the casing, the flesh and blood casing, he immediately assumes his spiritual body because he has already identified with it. And there is absolutely no identification with this world, which is also a condition which is being described. And as soon as he attained the spiritual body, Sri Narada Muni, he travels, he attains the same kind of qualitative spiritual body as the Supreme Lord. And then at the end of Lord Brahma's day, along with Lord Brahma and other sages and so on, he enters into the body of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. There is annihilation or end of creation partially. The lower portion of the universes, they become destroyed when Lord Brahma lies down at the end of his day, which is 4,300,000,000 years. That's one day of Lord Brahma. Once a day passes, which is almost 1,000 yuga cycles, he lies down in the body of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, right, in Yoga Nidra. And during that time, Sri Narada Muni in his lifetime, he also enters. And then when Lord Brahma appears again, right, Narada Muni appears again, and then he has got this extraordinary transcendental body. The transcendental body of Sri Narada Muni is such that it is eternal, right? It is not affected by the modes. The modes cannot influence the body. So he is able to, without restriction, travel throughout the spiritual and the material skies. The other sages, they do not have the authority to go to Vaikuntha. Sri Narada Muni has the ability to go to Vaikuntha. He can observe pastimes there. Wherever he desires, he will go and then come to earth. He can go to Patala, to the lower planetary systems, to deal with devotees, to deliver them. So he has this, extraordinary position now in the new lifetime, and in the new manifestation in the spiritual body, where he travels around, enlivening, enthusing, devotees. And what are the kind of devotees which Sri Narada Muni is coming in touch with? Dhruva, Prahlad Maharaj, extraordinary personalities, unquestioned in their extraordinary, faith and determination, so on. These are all people who are coming in touch with Sri Narada Muni, and Sri Narada Muni is the personified, agent of the Lord who enlivens and is present wherever there is intense bhakti. So he travels around. So the point which he was trying to make to Srila Vyasadeva is to say that the process of Bhakti Yoga is so simple, and the results we obtained were so profound. So he wanted to instill and give a semblance of, if you talk about Bhakti, Srila Vyasadeva, in Srimad Bhagavatam, there would be so many people who can have an experience like mine. You see, this was the whole purpose of Sri Narada Muni wanting to tell Vyasadeva that you should talk on Bhakti and it should be exclusive. Forget about Gyan, forget about Karma. Your other literature has covered all of that. Let's talk about Bhakti, because the profundity of Bhakti is such that it had the ability to give me such an experience, and the result of Bhakti is the reason why I am who I am. So he wanted to enthuse Srila Vyasadeva. No, this is what you ought to be writing about. The subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam is such that you ought to be writing about this. He wanted to enthuse him. Okay, so let's read the remaining verses of chapter 6. We just had a few verses. I practically have given you the synopsis of whatever it is. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Amayo yascha bhutanam jayate yena subrata tadeva hi amayam dravyam na punati chikitsitam. O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? Evam nranam kriya yoga sarve sanstrite hetavah Devatma vinashaya kalpante kalpitaha pare. Thus, when all a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading a chapter, different chapter. My mistake, but nothing wrong. Become destroyer of the tree of work. I had kept my marker and I somehow got distracted. Okay, text 23. Sat sevaya dirgayapi jatamai dridamatihi hitavadyam imam lokam gantamadhyanatamasi. By service of the absolute truth, even for a few days, a devotee attains firm and fixed intelligence in me. Consequently, he goes on to become my associate in the transcendental world after giving up the present deplorable material worlds. This is Krishna speaking to Sri Narada Muni. Text 24. Matirmai nibbadeyam na vipadyete karichit prajasarga nirodepi smritischa mad anugrahat. Intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time. Intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time. Even at the time of creation as well as at the time of annihilation, your remembrance will continue by my mercy. So this is fascinating news. You see, the beauty about this chapter is it enthuses us to reject every other goal and to take up pursuing transcendence. Just by this activity of this very young personality who was Narad Muni's previous birth, he goes around, does not get distracted because he hasn't come in touch with such a lofty, wonderful goal. And there he is focusing all his energy, saying, I have a few more years or whatever. And then Krishna comes to further enthuse him and to bring in a laser-like focus. Etavad ukto paravarama tanmahad bhutam nabo lingam alingam ishwaram aham chatasmai mahatam mahishyase shisnavanamam vidade nukampitaham. Then that supreme authority, personified by sound and unseen by eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. Feeling a sense of gratitude, I offered my obeisances unto him, bowing my head. Namani anantasya hatatrapah patan guhyani badrani kritani chasmaran gam paryatastam tushtamanam gataspriha kalam pratikshan vimado vimatsaraha. Thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. You see, the goal is known and the process is well known. So any intelligent person would not be distracted, which is what we are seeing here. He's ignoring all the formalities of the material world. He's complete absorption. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are benedictory. So doing, I traveled all over the earth fully satisfied, humble, and unenvious. Very important when we use the word unenvious here. How does one become envious? Envy does not come without material desires. There first has to be material desires. One has to desire a material accomplishment. And when one desires a material accomplishment and observes someone else as having attained such an accomplishment, then one develops this, oh, I wish I could have had that. Or why did that person have this? May that person lose this. This is enviousness, matsarya. So, unenviousness, a precondition for giving up envy, is lack of material desires. If someone has a transcendental objective, then why would they care if someone accomplished, did not accomplish, did whatever they had to do? There's really nothing which a person has to accomplish if their objective is completely transcendental. Why would there be envy? So this condition of fully satisfied, they are fully satisfied in the self. He is chanting and he's very happy about his chanting, his sadhana. He's very happy about the way the Lord is maintaining him in a very simple, nice fashion. Krishna is fully capable of maintenance. There's no doubt. For someone who is very focused, Krishna will make the arrangements. Now he is fully satisfied and he is also humble. What does it mean? He is able to accept the arrangements which are being made by the Lord and say that this is wonderful. Thank you, dear Lord. Thank you. He is not asking for, give me this, give me that. He is accepting. That is humility. Accepting the environment requires humility and unenviousness. Automatically, there is no envy whatsoever. Why? Because he is fully satisfied. He is also humble. He is accepting his environment. He is not desiring someone else's environment. He is completely unenvious. Evam Krishna Mate Brahman Nashatasya Malatmanah Kalaha Pradur Bhut Kale Tadit Saudamaniyata. And so, O Brahmana, Vyasadeva, in due course of time, I, who was fully absorbed in thinking of Krishna and who therefore had no attachments, being completely freed from all material taints, met with death as lightning and illumination occur simultaneously. This is such a glorious, glorious passage. You see, this is a celebration. Death is a celebration if this was the quality of death. Why? Because this person is completely, completely absorbed and the destination is better. What is a destination for a devotee who has been preparing and practicing? The destination for a devotee who is preparing and practicing is either continuation of the same thing or going back to Godhead. So what is there for lamentation? So this is such an auspicious event. See, it's like a child who is preparing for an exam. If a kid is preparing for an exam, or when we were preparing for exams, we used to be afraid if the preparation was lacking. But if someone is preparing every week, they're taking the tests, they're taking the monthly test, they're taking the quarterly test, they're taking the half-yearly, they're passing, they're calibrating themselves, they're making improvements. Why would they be afraid to take the final exam? They would be eager, because the final exam is a test which they would be eager to take. It is going to give them a promotion into the next level. So that is the attitude of a devotee. Fearless. Why? Because either he is going to continue his devotional service based on the desire of Krishna, or he is going to continue his devotional service in Goloka, in one of those. So why would a devotee be lamenting? It is so glorious to just come in touch. Even the most inauspicious event, as seen by others, is very auspicious if one is engaging in sadhana, in this devotional service. Full preparation. Students who don't prepare, they have to be afraid. 99.9% of people, they become very afraid 1 or 2 nights before death occurs. I have observed it in some close relatives. They will become disoriented. They will not know what is happening here. They will start moving around in a very completely disenchanted, fearful way, because they're already seeing that something ominous is coming to get them. And they start moving around, very restless. And death itself is an event which is not auspicious, because in fear, you see, it's not so wonderful. They have all kinds of remembrances of the lifetime, of things which they did and did not do. Because the senses are still active, the intelligence is still contaminated, desires have not been given up. This is material tainting. But how glorious is this description of preparation for final exam? This preparation for final exam is so exemplary and is building so much enthusiasm, even when we read through it, saying, this is what it is. Prepare for this. It's glorious. There's no lamentation whatsoever for a devotee, because they're prepared The intelligence is free of lust. There are no contaminations. There should be no desire whatsoever. And then, material desire, tainting, contamination. And then when the time comes, one is ready to make the transition. Amazing. Prayujyamane maitam suddham bhagavatim tanum arabdha karma nirvano nepatat panchabhautikaha. Having been awarded a transcendental body befitting an associate of the personality of Godhead, I quit the body made of 5 material elements, and thus all acquired fruitive results of work stopped. Finished. Along with that particular body, which was the fruit of the previous karmic reactions, the moment Sri Narada Muni's previous existence, he quit that body and he took on a spiritual nature. Everything that had associated with his existence in matter ended, finished. All karma was over. Our own karma, we can see that. When we come in touch with Krishna consciousness, we go to the temple, for instance, or we engage in arati, and we engage in dancing, we engage in kirtan, we engage in celebrating festivals. We engage in all these activities which are practically recognizing the transcendental nature of the activities of Krishna. Right? Janma karma chame divyam. We recognize that his activities and all of that associated with Krishna is transcendental. Because we recognize that, we are engaging in such activities, preparing ourselves. By coming in touch with Krishna consciousness and acting as if we are in Goloka, we are in Vrindavan, right? In a qualified, prescribed way given by the acharyas, we automatically are burning millions and millions of lifetimes of existence by just recognizing that this is what we want to do. What to say of someone who is absorbed in activities of the spiritual sky itself? That is what is happening here. The moment he finished his business here, he discarded this body as if discarding old, torn, useless clothes. He took on his spiritual body and he moved on. Kalpantaidamadaya sayanem basi udanvatah sishayishor anupranam vivishentaraham viboho. At the end of the millennium, when the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him along with all creative elements. And I also entered through his breathing. Sahasra yuga paryante uttayedam sishriksatah marichi mishra rishiyah pranebhyoham jagnire. After 4,300,000,000 solar years, when Brahma awoke to create again by the will of the Lord, all the rishis like Marichi, Angira, Atri, and so on were created from the transcendental body of the Lord, and I also appeared along with them. Antarbahischa lokamstrin paryemya skandita vrataha anugrahan mahavishnor avigata gati kvachit. Since then, by the grace of the Almighty Vishnu, I travel everywhere without restriction, both in the transcendental world and in the 3 divisions of the material world. This is because I am fixed in unbroken devotional service of the Lord. There are no restrictions if one wants to perform devotional service. He travels and he is preaching. Deva dattam iman vinam swara brahma vibhushitam muchyat itvakharikatam gayamanas charami aham. And thus I travel, constantly singing the transcendental message of the glories of the Lord, vibrating this instrument called the veena, which is charged with transcendental sound and which was given to me by Lord Krishna. Right? This is given as a part of, I think, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that this is a fact which is described in the Linga Purana of how Krishna offered the veena to Sri Narada Muni. This is also confirmed by Srila Jiva Goswami in his writings. And this veena being offered by Krishna, who is transcendental, to Narad Muni, who is also transcendental, is a transcendental instrument capable of evoking pure devotion to whoever hears the sound. Okay? So Sri Narad Muni, in accompaniment of his veena, goes around inspiring and evoking pure devotion in the hearts of whoever is qualified. Pragayatah swaviryani tirthapada priyashravaha ahuta eva me sigram darshanam yati chetashi. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart, as if called for as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. Prema, right? As soon as he begins talking, as soon as he begins chanting, because he is of the same nature as Krishna, the entire pastime appears in his heart. Etadhyatura chittanam matrasparscheyamuhu bhava sindhu plavo drishto hari charyanuvarnanam. It is personally experienced by me that those who are always full of cares and anxieties due to desiring contact of the senses with their objects can cross the ocean of nescience on a most suitable boat, the constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the personality of God. The best boat calling upon the holy names. Yamadibir yogapataihi kamalobahato muhu mukunda sevaya yadvat tatatmadaya nashamyati. It is true that by practicing restraint of the senses by the yoga system, one can get relief from the disturbance of desire and lust. Pratyahara. You can control your senses and you can withdraw it by the yoga system. And you can get relief from the harassment of the senses, harassment from desires, harassment from lust. But you're not going to be happy. Happiness requires the soul to come in touch with Krishna. That is Ananda. There's no question of Ananda in anything else. For this satisfaction is derived from devotional service to the personality of Godhead. Sarvam tadidam akyatam yat prishtoham tvayanaga janma karma rahasyam me bhavataschatmatoshanam. O Vyasadeva, you are freed from all sins. Thus I have explained my birth and activities for self-realization as you asked. All this will be conducive for your personal satisfaction also. Shri Sutta Uvacha Evam Sambhashya Bhagavan Narado Vasavi Sutam Amantriyavinam Ranayan Yayo Yadrachiko Munihi. Sutta Goswami said, thus addressing Vyasadeva, Srila Narad Muni took leave of him and vibrating on his veena instrument, he left to wander at his free will. Aho Deva Rishir Danyoyam Yat Kirtim Sharanga Danavanaha Gayan Madhyan Idam Tantraya Ramayati Aturam Jagat. All glory and success to Srila Narad Muni, because he glorifies the activities of the personality of Godhead, and so doing, he himself takes pleasure and also enlivens all the distressed souls of the universe. What an amazing, amazing chapter. Amazing chapter. Isn't it fascinating that when we hear accounts of qualified devotees giving their experiences to enthuse, to bring about our own enthusiasm, this particular account of Sri Narad Muni was to enthuse Srila Vyasadeva. For he was glorifying the process and the simplicity and the profundity and the strength of the process of Bhakti Yoga. He was glorifying his experience, of how profound it is and how simple it is and how wonderful it is to engage in chanting of the holy names. So the glorification and setting the purpose of chanting is seen in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is seen in the middle of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is also seen in the end of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is to enthuse us to take up serious chanting of the holy names. Serious chanting of the holy names will enthuse us to read the Srimad Bhagavatam. So they go hand in hand. And being followers of Lord Chaitanya, we are especially fortunate of coming in touch with Bhagavad Gita through Srimad Bhagavatam, because the goal of Sri Chaitanya's movement is to award Krishna Prema. And Sri Krishna Prema is to be experienced by coming in touch with Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. One who attains Krishna Prema by the chanting of the holy names, comes in touch with Bhagavatam to get further enlivened by the pastimes of Krishna. Their behavior is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's postgraduate study for that purpose. Otherwise, we will never be able to understand why someone is behaving the way they are as described in the Charitamrita. That's why Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is to be read after Bhagavad Gita is understood. Bhagavad Gita explains Tattva. We understand who is Krishna, who is devotee. We understand the relationship through Bhagavad Gita in an analytical way. That is Tattva. And then we understand, after coming there, on how to approach Srimad Bhagavatam, we understand Srimad Bhagavatam after that. And then finally we go on to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita to experience that. Okay. So practice of the eightfold yoga system and to desire the 8 or 18 varieties of mystic perfections are also categorized as bhukti. The greed for bhukti forces a jiva to become subordinate to the 6 enemies headed by lust and anger. Okay. What is the question? I don't see the question. So one can practice. Okay. Envy easily takes over the heart of jiva and rules it. From Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur's Bhakti Tattva Viveka, how does one become envious, and of whom if they are already in possession of the mystic perfection? In this case, since they are already materially accomplished. Material accomplishment is not going to purify the hankering for further material accomplishment. Hiranyakashipu and all the demons, they had perfections. It did not prevent them from further hankering and becoming envious of Krishna. The demigods who are seated in the heaven, they don't become satisfied because material accomplishments never satisfy the senses, but further enliven the senses to get agitated because they are fully immersed in the modes. So there is no question of becoming non-envious by material accomplishment. Oh, let me achieve this. Let me try and achieve this first. And if I achieve something in materially, then I would become free of such anxieties. That's not the question. The more we become absorbed in material activity for the sake of accomplishment, which is unconnected to Krishna, the more we become entangled, and more we become entangled, the more we are going to be situated in contamination and lust, and there is going to be enviousness. There is no question of being free from envy by coming in touch with or being in touch with matter. Being in touch with matter will produce more desires, throwing fuel into a fire. Someone attains great Shakti like the Asuras. Where do they stop? They go on the next level. They want to conquer this, conquer that. It keeps going. On the other hand, you have Raja Rishis who also had 8 mystic perfections. And these 8 mystic perfections were controlled by the Raja Rishis because internally they were completely surrendered and they were desiring transcendence and they were engaging in transcendental activity and transcendental meditation internally. Because they were internally satisfied, the external manifestation of power was used by them effectively to aid and serve nicely. If internally the person is unqualified and is in touch with contamination, externally acquiring all kinds of opulences and power is not going to free such a person from envy. They're only going to get more and more entangled. Okay, what else? In fact, there is a definition of a Raja Rishi. Janaka. He had all the mystic perfections, but internally he was situated in transcendence and he was completely identifying himself as a servant. So this external obtaining of opulences and Shakti didn't deter him, doesn't disturb him. Internally, he is well situated. People who are not situated well internally, they are in trouble. They're not going to be able to manage power. Power will destroy, contaminate. Okay, I don't see any questions. If there are questions, you can use Facebook. I think Tripti Mataji, you had a question the previous week, and I guess there was a verse there which you also found. We can accept remnants without permission. We can. But Sri Narad Muni, in his childhood, was very sober, where he took with permission. You can accept remnants both ways. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop here, and we will take it up in the next session. Today is Monday, so we'll take it up. We'll take it up on Thursday again, and it'll be chapter 7. Hare Krishna.